spend any time traveling around, you begin to see buildings and what they stand for. It becomes pretty clear in some instances what exactly it is that you're viewing. Pretty obvious what some of the core ideas are when you encounter a cathedral. Chinese have pagodas to capture the spirit of their culture. Mosques, especially in the Middle Ages, especially now in the Middle East, express the belief structure of Islam. And we've all seen Congregationalist churches with red brick on their sides and the steeples, and they are a staple of every small New England town. Synagogue models are quite different. You can just see the variety in our own community as well. Even the Aron Kodesh, that which houses the ark that houses the Sifrei Torah, also a large variety in how they appear. There is one structure, and it's an ironic kind of thing if you think about it, that is ordained for the Jewish people to observe from the time of Torah for all time, and that is the Sukkah. And the Sukkah, if you think about it, is remarkably unusual as a candidate for that kind of status. The Sukkot Teshvu Shivat Yamim, you're supposed to dwell in it for 7 days, and what are we dwelling in? Something that is inherently fragile, a covering that must be open enough for us to be able to see the stars, with walls that a good storm will knock down in easy fashion. Some of us have experienced that. It's a very unusual candidate for Jewish required space. The Sukkot idea of success, as it were, seems to have some exposure to the elements, especially when autumn comes. Autumn, you remember that season that's supposed to happen around this time of the year, but seems to be at least this time running on Jewish time. But it's the season when everything seems to go underground as far as nature is concerned, but as nature, as it were, seems to prepare to die, it explodes in radiant colors as if to say, this too is what is so much the bounty of God's world, and if you can't experience this personally, you are missing out on something magnificent. So we are urged to do precisely that. Sukkot reminds us of what really matters when it comes to shelter. It's the love that is to be found there. It's the relationships that are built there. It's the understanding that bricks and mortar do not a home make. The Sukkah, if you think about it, is all about openness, and it shares that with other parts of Jewish tradition. In a marriage ceremony, a couple is married underneath a chuppah, which is a home without walls, as if to say that at that supreme moment of joy, a couple has to allow the world outside to be able to view in, and the couple has to be able to look out, as if to say, too, that couple, no matter how secure and loving a home they wish to build is all about, also needs to allow it to be open enough for others, especially those in need, to be able to find a home there as well. One of the holiest spaces that we can possibly imagine, arguably the most holy space of all in the Jewish world at this point in time, is the Kotel, the Western Wall in Jerusalem. It is an open-air plaza. And depending upon the time of the year, you will see hundreds, if not thousands, gather there, their voices rising in a cacophony of different languages and melodies, all in praise to the Divine One, all open to the elements. So some of the most vibrant and beautiful Jewish spaces, again, are all about openness. Even a synagogue, according to Jewish practice, has to at least have a window so that what is said here can leak out, as it were, to the world outside, and we, inside this sacred space, can have an idea of what's happening in the world, that it might enter our experience so that we are not secluded from the world at large. Now, in any given year, that's a pretty powerful lesson. But the real significance of this in a pandemic year, and with architecture really at the forefront of what we're thinking about today, came through to me in a very compelling article by Rabbi Sarah Hurwitz. She says this: noting how building a sukkah can sometimes be very challenging, especially if you're an apartment dweller and want to maintain social distancing as well, it reminds us of one of the most unusual legal leniencies when it comes to the building of a sukkah. You don't have to have 4 walls. She goes on to explain. For practical and economic reasons, there's a leniency about open spaces that are imagined walls as much as they are actual. According to the laws of Sukkot, there is this ideal of gud asik, walls that are 10 tefachim, which is to say about 40 inches high. If they don't quite reach the schach, that thatched roof, there's a space there, they're still considered to be kosher, which is to say that there's a projection in our imagination that that partial wall is like a whole one. And according to the concept of lavud, if two walls are within 3 tefachim, about 9.5 inches, they are considered as if they're connected. The empty space is imagined as a solid wall. Even more openness than we would ordinarily figure would be there, these partial walls even create more of that sense of openness. There's even humor that's told about this. This is Jewish humor at its best, at least rabbinic humor. There's a thief who took advantage of these open spaces in a sukkah while he reached in and stole a silver Kiddush cup. The incident was brought to Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grodzinski, a Lithuanian rabbi at the beginning of the 20th century. He remarked that this thief must have been an Am Haaretz, somebody not knowledgeable about Jewish law, because a true Torah scholar, a Talmid Chacham, would never have done such a thing. He would have known the laws of lavud, that the space imagined there is completely solid, so he would never have put his hand through that kind of a wall. Extra space that we are allowed to complete and whole as a whole in our imagination. It's not only an added bonus for ventilation. It raises a question, and it's a wonderful question. It's a crucial question, friends. And that is, what do we do when we look into the openness? What do we do when we look into an abyss, a vacuum? And if we do think of it, how often do we think of it as something that could be filled with important things in life? To see something missing as if it was already actually there. If you think about it, all of the great things in life come about that way. The place where we are sitting right now was once upon a time an empty lot. How many Jews and others in the 19th century, seeing Europe convulsed with anti-Semitism at so many different times and places, would have looked out into the wide abyss of space and imagined that there would be a Jewish state some years hence? We would do very well to remember this. Where would we be without the dreamers who could look into emptiness and imagine it being filled with something that is not currently there? The entrepreneurs. And how about us? How many of us might look into the open spaces of something that's not there, maybe even a tabula rasa, an empty slate in our minds, and realize how enriched we could be if we were to fill that emptiness with new learning, a new language, a new skill, a new sense of what is possible to acquire that would enrich us so powerfully. And how different life would be for other people if we could imagine that empty space that fills the lives of so many people who hurt, and imagine that being filled with something remarkable, such as a city child who can't imagine having anything other than the crowded four walls of that existence, being given the beauty of a summer camp experience, something that he or she probably could never have imagined, but others might grant. And how many open spaces of sadness, of unachieved possibilities in other people's lives could be filled by our showing up at the door with a greeting, with a meal, with something special. We have to imagine it first, but the emptiness is not our enemy. It is just a task to be filled. And Sukkot can be a wonderful reminder of that, how powerful it can be if we hone our imaginations and live for the meaningful. I hope that that could be the ultimate beauty of the Sukkah for us all, where we can see not only that which is there, we can imagine what isn't there yet, and be inspired to dream big and live the good life for ourselves and for many others. Chag Sameach.